May 19, 1921, immigration restricted. The Emergency Quota Act marked a defining moment in the history of American immigration policy. It was the first federal law to impose numerical limits on immigration, signaling a shift away from the country's long-standing open-door policy. Passed by Congress and signed by President Warren G. Harding, the law aimed to restrict the influx of immigrants by setting quotas based on national origin. The act limited immigration to 3% of the number of foreign-born persons from each nationality living in the United States as recorded in the 1910 census. This formula favored immigrants from Northern and Western Europe, while restricting those from Southern and Eastern Europe. Nations such as Italy, Poland, and Russia saw sharp reductions in their quotas. The law capped annual immigration at 357,000 people, creating a system that controlled entry by national origin rather than individual merit or circumstance. The context behind the act stemmed from rising nativist sentiment and economic concerns following World War I. A surge in immigration during the early 20th century had sparked fears among some Americans that jobs and resources were being threatened by foreign labor. Anti-immigrant attitudes were further amplified by cultural and racial prejudices, particularly against non-Anglo-Saxon populations. Lawmakers advocated for immigration limits as a means to preserve what they viewed as traditional American values. The Emergency Quota Act was intended as a temporary measure, but its influence was long-lasting. It laid the foundation for the Immigration Act of 1924, also known as the Johnson-Reed Act, which imposed even stricter quotas based on the 1890 census and introduced permanent national origin restrictions. These laws drastically reduced immigration for decades and significantly altered the demographic composition of the United States. The act had immediate and profound effects. Ellis Island, once the primary entry point for millions of immigrants, saw a dramatic decline in new arrivals. Ethnic communities from Southern and Eastern Europe faced barriers to family reunification and community growth. In contrast, immigration from Northern Europe remained relatively unaffected, reinforcing a preference for certain ethnic groups in U.S. policy. The Emergency Quota Act is significant because it marked the beginning of a period of restrictive immigration policies that lasted until the mid-20th century. It reflected widespread public support for limiting immigration and institutionalized discriminatory practices through legislation. While the act was presented as a response to economic and social pressures, its criteria were rooted in racial and ethnic biases that shaped national policy for years to come. Today, the act is viewed as a turning point in U.S. immigration history, highlighting the tension between national identity, economic interests, and human mobility. It set a precedent for future immigration controls and demonstrated the federal government's expanding role in regulating who could enter the United States. For enthusiasts of historical ephemera, visit history-collectors.com to find collectibles that might complement your collection. You can own a piece of history.